No one noticed when Iris Hartwell pressed herself against the wooden wall of Murphy's General Store, but everyone noticed when they spoke about her, like she was already gone. The cold Montana wind of 1867 cut through her thin dress and into her bones, but it was the words inside the store that hurt the most. Sharp whispers floated through the dusty air, landing on her like stones. Mrs. Henderson's voice rose above the rest, confident and cruel, saying that girl brought nothing but trouble wherever she went. Iris closed her eyes and tried to make herself smaller. At 16, she had learned how to disappear. She had spent her whole life doing it. No family, no money, no protection. Just a name written on a scrap of paper that had been pinned to her blanket when she was left on the church steps as a baby. Please take care of Iris. No one ever truly had. Another woman spoke up, saying Iris had been fired from the Miller farm and accused of stealing a silver spoon. Iris's hands shook. Not with guilt, but with anger she had learned never to show. The spoon had been found days later exactly where she said it was, but apologies were not given to girls like her. Once a story stuck, it stayed. Mrs. Henderson went on, saying Iris would end up on the street soon enough, and she could not imagine who would be foolish enough to trust her. The bell above the door rang, cutting through the gossip like a blade. Heavy boots crossed the wooden floor. Iris opened her eyes and looked up. The man who entered carried silence with him. Jacob Whitmore was tall and broad-shouldered, moving with a steady calm that made the room feel smaller. His brown leather coat was worn but clean. His face looked tired, like he carried grief the way other men carried tools, always close and always heavy. Everyone in town knew his story. His wife had died 2 winters ago. Since then, he came to town once a month, bought his supplies, spoke little, and left. Jacob gathered flour, coffee, and sugar. His hands were careful and gentle, as if he had learned long ago how easily things could break. When he reached for a bag on the high shelf, his eyes met Iris's. She expected him to look away like everyone else always did, but he didn't. His gaze held no disgust and no pity, only something quiet and understanding, like he knew what it felt like to be alone in a place that didn't want you. Mrs. Henderson noticed and scoffed, warning him not to let that girl fool him. She called Iris trouble. Jacob's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He paid for his supplies, then turned back toward Iris. The store went silent. He called her Miss and asked if he might speak with her outside. Iris's heart pounded so hard she thought it might give her away. She whispered to ask if he meant her, pointing to herself. He said yes, with a hint of kindness in his eyes. She followed him on unsteady legs, aware of every stare burning into her back. Outside, the air felt cleaner and freer. Jacob spoke plainly, saying he heard she was looking for work. Iris nodded. Everyone knew she was desperate. She said yes and told him she needed work. Jacob said he needed help on his ranch. Honest work and hard work. He could offer room, food, and fair pay, and he would ask no questions about her past. The words did not make sense to her. Men did not offer things like that to girls like her. She asked why, her voice soft and unsure. Jacob looked toward the mountains, their peaks already touched with snow. He said everyone deserved a chance, and it seemed she had not yet had hers. The wagon ride took them away from Copper Creek and into a wide valley that made Iris's breath catch. Golden grass rolled like waves, and mountains stood strong and quiet, watching over everything. Jacob spoke little, but when he did, his words were gentle. He pointed out hawks, deer tracks, and clouds that meant weather was coming. He said they had built the ranch 8 years ago, and his wife had loved this valley. Iris heard the love still living in his voice and wondered what it must feel like to be cherished that way. The ranch house appeared around a bend, solid and warm, with smoke curling from the chimney. Behind it stood a barn, a corral, and a small cabin near the trees. Jacob told her the cabin was hers. It had a bed, a stove, a table, and a water pump outside. Her own place. The cabin was small, clean, and perfect. A quilt lay neatly on the bed, and a single purple wildflower sat on the windowsill. Jacob said his wife liked flowers and thought Iris might too. Tears burned behind Iris's eyes, but she swallowed them down. Kindness was unfamiliar territory. That evening, Jacob brought her supper: stew, warm bread, and milk. He said the first day could be overwhelming. After he left, Iris ate by the window, watching stars fill the sky. Her stomach was full, but something else was fuller too: hope. For the first time in her life, someone had chosen her. And as the mountains stood silent outside, Iris felt something shift deep inside her. Maybe this place could be different. Maybe she could be different. She did not yet know how hard the road ahead would be, but she knew one thing for certain: she was no longer invisible. The rooster's crow split the darkness like a gunshot, and Iris bolted upright in bed with her heart racing. Pale light barely touched the edge of the sky outside her small cabin window. The mountains were only shadows, but the cold already pressed in like a warning. Ranch life did not wait for comfort. She dressed quickly in the sturdy clothes Jacob had left for her, surprised by how strange it felt to wear trousers instead of a dress. When she stepped outside, her breath rose in white clouds. The world smelled of frost, hay, and animals. Jacob was already in the barn, lantern lights swinging as he moved between the stalls. Horses shifted and snorted softly, their warmth cutting through the cold. The sound felt alive and steady. He greeted her without looking up and told her to grab a bucket, because they would start with feed. There was no hesitation in his voice, no doubt that she belonged there. The work was harder than anything Iris had known. Her hands ached, her arms burned, and her back protested every movement. But Jacob showed her everything with patience, explaining cattle the way some people explain books. He said animals told you what they needed if you paid attention, and that you just had to listen. She listened with everything she had. By noon, Iris was exhausted, but beneath the soreness was something new: pride. As they rested under a cottonwood tree, Jacob told her she moved calm, and that animals trusted that. No one had ever said something like that to her before. The words stayed with her long after the day ended. Weeks passed, then months. Winter came early and fierce, wrapping the valley in white and silence. Iris learned to read the sky, to mend fences, and to handle horses with a steady hand. Her body grew stronger, but more importantly, so did her spirit. On the ranch, she was not a burden or a rumor. She mattered. When they rode into Copper Creek for supplies, Iris felt the old tension return. The town had not changed. Whispers followed them like shadows. Mrs. Henderson stood near the store entrance, her eyes sharp and hungry. She spoke loudly about the rancher and his little arrangement. Iris kept her chin up, but her stomach twisted. Inside the store, voices drifted through the windows. People spoke about what was proper and what was not. They said no good would come of a young girl living alone with a widower. Jacob said nothing, but Iris saw the tension in his jaw. On the ride home, she finally spoke, telling him they were talking about him because of her. Jacob shook his head and said they talked because they did not understand, and what mattered was what they knew was true. That night, as they sat by the fire going over account books, Iris watched the lines of worry on his face. She made a quiet decision then. She would not let the town destroy what they were building. She would work harder, stand taller, and give them no reason to doubt her place. The storm came in February. The wind howled like something alive, and snow slammed against the cabin walls. Iris saw Jacob's lantern near the barn and ran into the white darkness. He shouted that the north fence was down and cattle were scattering toward the canyon. Fear clenched her chest, but she did not hesitate. She said she would take Belle east while he went north. Jacob told her it was too dangerous, but she said the cattle would die if they waited. For a long moment, they stared at each other through the storm. Then Jacob nodded. The night stretched on endlessly. Iris followed Belle through snow and wind, finding cattle huddled and frozen. She guided them back with her voice and the horses' steady strength. At the canyon's edge, panic threatened to take her. The wind screamed, and the drop yawned dark and wide. Iris placed herself between the herd and the edge, trusting Belle to hold the line. She spoke softly to the animals, her voice shaking but strong enough. When dawn finally broke, every animal was safe. Jacob helped her down from the saddle, his hands steady and his eyes full of something she had never seen before. He told her she had saved them. Iris corrected him and said they had saved them. Later, by the fire, warming frozen hands, Jacob spoke again. He said he thought he was giving her a chance, but she had given one to him. She had reminded him how to live. The room felt suddenly small, the air heavy with unspoken truth. Jacob stood and reached for her, pulling her gently into his arms. Iris froze for a heartbeat. Then she felt it. Warmth. Safety. Acceptance. She had never been held like that before, not once in her life. Her body relaxed without permission, leaning into something she had never known she needed. When they finally pulled apart, everything had changed. Neither of them said a word, but neither could pretend anymore. The storm outside eased, but inside, something powerful had been set in motion. Iris lay awake that night, staring at the cabin ceiling, her heart full and frightened all at once. She did not know what the future would demand of her, but she knew this. Whatever came next would test them both, and the valley that had given her a home was about to ask for more than strength. Spring came to the valley slowly, like the land itself was afraid to hope too soon. Snow pulled back from the hills in thin, shining lines. Grass pushed through frozen ground, and the air softened. Iris felt the change inside herself, too. She moved with confidence now, her shoulders straight, her voice steady. The work beside Jacob felt natural, like a rhythm they had always known. They did not speak about the night by the fire. They did not need to. The way Jacob looked at her had changed. There was warmth where distance once lived. The way Iris stood beside him carried trust instead of fear. They worked side by side, quiet and strong, building something neither had known they were missing. Trouble came riding in from the east on a clear morning. 3 strangers appeared at the edge of the ranch, their horses fine, and their clothes too clean for Montana dirt. The man who stepped forward had cold eyes and a stiff smile. He introduced himself as Martin Fitzgerald and said Catherine was his sister. The words landed hard. Jacob went still. Iris felt the ground shift beneath her feet. A lawyer with sharp eyes spoke next, his voice smooth and practiced. He said there were concerns about Jacob's management of Catherine's inheritance and about the living situation on the ranch. Martin pointed at Iris and said the solution was simple. Send the girl away, or they would challenge Jacob's right to the land. They gave him 48 hours. That night the house was heavy with silence. Iris sat alone in her cabin, staring at the quilt on her bed. She thought of every place she had been pushed out of, every door closed in her face. She made a decision before dawn. She would leave. She would not let Jacob lose everything because of her. Jacob found her at first light, packing her few things. He told her to stop. Iris tried to explain, saying she could not be the reason he lost his home. Jacob's voice broke when he told her the ranch was not worth keeping if it meant losing her. He said they would face this together. The courthouse in Copper Creek filled like it never had before. People whispered and stared as Iris walked beside Jacob, wearing a blue dress she had sewn with her own hands. The men tried to paint her as a scandal and a mistake. They spoke of rules and appearances. When Jacob stood, his voice was calm and steady. He spoke of partnership, of respect, of work done honestly. He spoke of love that builds instead of controls. Then something unexpected happened. Voices rose from the crowd. The store owner spoke, then the blacksmith, then neighboring ranchers. They spoke of Iris's work, her strength, and her character. They spoke of what they had seen, not what they had heard. A woman stepped forward. She said her name was Beth Morrison, and she said she was Iris Hartwell's sister. The room went silent. Beth placed a small wooden horse into Iris's trembling hands. The touch unlocked something deep and buried, a memory of a song, a feeling of safety. a truth Iris had never known she carried. The judge ruled clearly. The ranch stayed with Jacob. Their partnership was honored. Outside the courthouse, under the open sky, Iris felt something settle inside her. She was no longer choosing survival. She was choosing love. They married in the valley that had remade them both. The ceremony was simple and honest. Mountains stood witness. The wind carried their promises across the grass. Iris stood tall, no longer hiding. Jacob held her hand with quiet pride. Years passed. The ranch grew, but so did their purpose. Girls with nowhere else to go found work, shelter, and dignity there. Second chances took root like wildflowers. Laughter returned to the valley. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Iris stood on the porch with Jacob's arm around her. She had once pressed herself into walls, trying to disappear. Now she stood in her own valley, seen and chosen. She had learned that love was not about being saved. It was about being seen, and in the quiet strength of a widower's embrace, Iris Hartwell had finally learned what it meant to belong.